Well, thank you all for joining us here tonight. This is one of several community forums that we've held, for the South Elementary School building project, which at present is in its infancy. We are now really just beginning the feasibility study, and this is the first part of the process that, if any of you remember how we started the high school project, it was visioning. We asked the community what they wanted to see in a school, took that input back, and if you don't, if you don't follow us day to day, you don't know. A lot of what we heard from the community was eventually incorporated into the project and the beautiful building you see on Pearl Street today. So we've spent the last year setting up the team. We have pretty much the exact same team we had for the high school, which for me was very encouraging because I worked closely with them for the better part of 6 years, I think it was, and came out with what I think the community at large, I'm not going to speak for everyone, of course, but I've heard enough compliments to say that it was a very successful project. And hopefully this one is as well, because I think it's a real exciting thing for me, and I hope it is for the community. And some of the feedback we've received thus far, it tells me that for the parents of young kids, they see the excitement of a new elementary school building and the improvement of the school district generally. So at that, I don't want to take too much time. Let me just assure everyone that, as I said, this is the first part of the project. And again, if you followed the high school project, one of the things you'll know and you'd have to confess to is that we had no shortage of public outreach. There were dozens and dozens of public meetings. We met with community groups and the fraternal orders, veterans groups, moms groups. We had several community group meetings where only one person showed up, and we had full presentation. And that was the plan back then, and that's the plan that we have in place right now for informing the community of our work as we define a project, which at present none of us know. And that's the point of feasibility. We're going to study all the angles of it and come up with something that meets the community's needs and hopefully meets your expectations for what an elementary school building should be in Stoughton. So with that, if I could pass along to Dr. Rob to pick up from there.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you for that introduction. So just as a bit of a big overview and really going back almost 20 years, but when we look at the South, ADA committee work began from 2003 to 2009. And we recognized then that ADA updates were needed in all of our buildings. The buildings had some level of door frame, door opener, restroom, elevator, countertop work that needed to be done, all with the exception of the South. And at the time, they did a lot of research and realized there was no feasible construction solution to remedy the multi-level obstacles, and that didn't approach the cost of building replacement. And so to try to bring the school up to code just with ADA, even at that time, was almost the same price as replacing the building. So the building was grandfathered in based on the idea that it was being prioritized for replacement at some point in the future. There was a facilities master planning in 2010, and that led to prioritization of the school buildings for replacement, which included the South and the high school as the two priority buildings at that time. A vote of the Facilities Master Planning Committee and the school committee was to invest in life safety repairs for the South and prioritize the high school for replacement. And as you know, we have our beautiful new high school now that opened in 2019, backed by the MSBA. Along the way, while we were working on the high school, statements of interest were also submitted for the South School. And we kept the South School on the front burner with the MSBA, so that now we're in the beginning of the feasibility study for the project for the MSBA. And the South has been ranked as the next school that needs replacement. There's no surprises here, and the MSBA is behind us in this endeavor. They're allowing us to do, if you could flip to the next slide, they're allowing us to consider two different options. One option would be to replace just the South with a design enrollment of 225 students, or they're giving us the option of going to 5 elementary schools to 4 with a design enrollment of 515 students. Now, it's important to remember that that's simply a design enrollment. The actual enrollment of those schools could be much higher than that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is we haven't forgotten the other schools in the district as well. We've just approved at the last special town meeting dual entry vestibules at both the Daw and the Gibbons to bring them up to security standards similar to the high school and the middle school. We also approved at the special town meeting camera replacements and upgrades at all schools, and any of those upgrades and replacements that are done at the south can be repurposed at other schools down the road. And for our annual town meeting coming up in May, we're working with the CPC on a playground replacement at the Hanson. So we have really been looking at the whole district and trying to make sure that all the schools stay upgraded. But the biggest prioritization right now is the south. And if we have the opportunity to go from 5 elementary schools to 4, that would be a chance to repurpose the Wilkins into something else. So we're really excited about the opportunity, and I'll turn it over to Carl and the project management team.
Thank you, Dr. Rabb. I'd like to share with everyone the first steps here that as part of the feasibility study. There's basically sort of 3 components that we're undertaking simultaneously here. One of them being a look at existing conditions. And I think that one's fairly straightforward and probably the reason we're here and the reason that South Elementary rose to the top of the priority list, that the existing conditions there really need attention and do not compare to a modern energy efficient elementary school. There, as was mentioned, there are the handicap code issues there with the many levels of the school that are very difficult to overcome right now. But the systems themselves, the things you can't even see behind the walls, the electrical system, the heating system, the roof, some of those systems are really well beyond their expected life and longevity. As I mentioned, the envelope of the building is very deficient compared to today's energy codes. There's single pane windows, for instance, and things like that. And the layout of the building too leaves a bit to be desired in terms of adjacencies and so forth. So we have a team of architects and engineers that have gone through the building. We're preparing a report. That's one of the first parts of the first submissions going into the state, the school building authority. But in addition to the physical conditions, we're also looking at sort of the educational appropriateness of the spaces, the size of the spaces, how they're equipped and how they're furnished and so forth. And there again, there certainly much room for improvement. And we wanted to show you kind of what exists today on the left at South and what could be contemporary schools, like the cafeteria space, like even the hallways today are more than just spaces to pass through. The hallways are often considered extensions of the learning environment. And we try to use every little bit of space creatively with nooks and crannies, sitting places, breakout spaces from the adjacent classrooms and so forth. And the classrooms themselves, are again, a little bit evolved from the school in the 50s and 60s when South and Wilkins were built, when the desks were pretty much lined up in rows and the teacher kind of lectured at the head of the class. Now there are more sort of varied activities that go on in classrooms that need certain support, both with technology and with equipment and lighting and so forth. So that's another area that would certainly be incorporated in a new school. Here's a little on the right, little nook in a sort of private reading area inside of a classroom today for the younger grades. It kind of reflects the development of more personalized learning. Recognizing that not all students learn in the same way, and we want to develop spaces and furnishings that respond to that. The gym at South is much smaller than what a new school could provide, and also in terms of natural light too. It's sort of an internal space there. But today, even an elementary school can have a full-size basketball court that the community could use too. It becomes a real community facility, and the gym can be one of the major components of that in a new school. In the library too, it certainly evolved significantly as we rely, less on books and get more information from computers these days. The nature and space of a library has changed significantly too. And a lot of group activities go on in libraries now. They often have maker spaces, STEM project rooms adjacent to them now, or quiet study rooms. When there is a larger group in the library, you can have smaller groups in more supervised but acoustically separated small group rooms. And even outdoors too, that there's a trend we realized during COVID that it's valuable to take advantage of the outdoor space, not just because it's a pleasant environment, but it can be an extension of the learning spaces in a school, particularly obviously if it's designed that way from the start. There can be assembly areas outdoors that, as we say, are not just for play, but for learning too. So these are some of the things that we would work towards as we think about a new school and what it could be. And Dom from Vertex can talk about the school building authority process too.
Thank you, Carl. Basically, the slide is saying where are we going. This is just to give you an understanding of what a feasibility and schematic study is about and the milestones that we go through. Carl just spoke about we're in the midst of the preliminary design program right now. He talked about space planning and evaluation of existing conditions and site. But also at the same time, we're with the help of our principals of the South and the Wilkins, we're writing a 21st century education program for elementary students and the teachers with also their input and part of the visioning session. And Carl and Courtney will talk about some of that later on. But the main thing to know is that we're tasked to do a preliminary evaluations. And we are required to do 5 options, which explore the 225 student and 550 enrollment. This will be submitted by the 4th of April, and it has to go, as it's being submitted, it'll go through the school committee for approval to proceed. So there are no decisions, just options at this point. Once we get past that, we go into what we call preferred schematic report. We'll continue to evaluate what we have done in the preliminary design program. We'll look at some of the lists of items that are as far as the short list of options, and we'll come down to a preferred solution. We'll make that final decision on regarding the enrollment, and we will produce what is most cost effective and educationally appropriate for the town of Stoughton, and we submit that in June of 2023. Once we get the go-ahead, then we start really zoning in on the project itself. We'll be doing a schematic design, which we'll start to put pen to paper on the final design, and we'll start bringing in our consultants more, which includes the traffic, environmental, geotech, and code, ADA requirements, and we'll start to get our classrooms put together there. We'll look also, eventually it'll be the total budget for the project, and we'll have a project schedule. And this will be submitted January 2024. Carl, if you can get the next slide. So this is just a little bar chart of a schedule. As I said, we'll be submitting the preliminary design program in April, followed by the preferred schematic in June, and then we'll be submitting the schematic design report in January of 2024. We'll have everything ready for the town meeting ballot vote on May of 2024. And if all goes well and we put together the bid package, that'll go out June of 20, yeah, I'm sorry, I think.
That's right.
I see 5/24, but I think we meant, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
June of 25, yeah.
June of 25, and we should be in the building in September of 2027. So that's hoping everything goes well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So as part of this first phase two, as was mentioned, we are looking at a series of options, not just for the enrollment, not just for the building configuration, but also for the site of the school. And we started off with a fairly long list of all available parcels in Stoughton. That's one of the things that state asks us to do. But clearly for an elementary school in a location in a district that has geographic assignments of space, we wanted to narrow it down to those parcels that are in the right part of Stoughton, in the south part, near where the existing school is. And really, the only ones that truly met the more basic criteria of availability and size and location are these three. And they include the existing school itself, which is number 13, which is on a separate parcel from the space behind it, which is 14, the athletic field space behind the South School. And then nearby, number 1 is a parcel of land that the town has owned since the 1960s. It was acquired for the purpose of future educational use. So the town fathers back then had that foresight, and it does have some frontage on Park Street. So it could get access directly from that. There would be a need for, understanding the traffic implications of that and maybe adding a signal or so forth. But it does have frontage there. It actually has some frontage on the cul-de-sac nearby that, might serve as pedestrian access or a secondary emergency access to the site as well. So those are the 3 parcels that we will develop further. And as Don mentioned, we will also be looking at 2 different enrollments, and we'll be looking at, in addition, renovation of the existing school too, which is a requirement of this feasibility phase. So with those number of variables, we kind of like to do this objectively and think of this kind of in a linear fashion as a decision tree, you might say, where, we have the 2 different enrollments to think about. We have the new versus addition renovation to think about. And then we have the 3 different parcels of land that the school might be sited on. So there are a number of options and permutations that happen out of just those number of variables there that we'll be looking at in the next month or so as part of that first submission. And then later in the spring, we'll be narrowing it down to a single preferred option. And the other major part of this phase, as was mentioned, is the educational program. And the 2 principals from the South and the Wilkins schools have created a draft already of that educational program with some input from these visioning sessions too that were very well attended, with about 35 participants representing a variety of backgrounds, some from administration, some teachers, parents, community partners, the design team as well. And there were 3 different 2-hour sessions, well organized, led by our educational facilities planner, Dr. David Stevens, who led the sessions and compiled the information that we can share with you a little bit here, just a sample of some of that came out of it. That when asked about, what should the new school be, what kind of words come to mind, this word cloud was formed. You can see collaborative was one of the major adjectives used as to, what the new school, what the new spaces should be. They should be engaging for students, inclusive, community use, and you see others there. And then we shared a lot of trends in education and educational goals and priorities. And then the group was asked to prioritize those, which were the most important here in Stoughton. And a couple that rose to the top were responding to student-centered learning, dealing with social and emotional learning, not just sort of curriculum content, but also the social and emotional development of students. Universal design for learning, that's also that notion that I mentioned about recognizing that students learn in different ways, and so the curriculum might need to be presented in multiple ways, and the spaces should support that, and so forth. So those are some of the patterns and principles that will be going into the educational program. And just to sort of summarize too, that there's a school or a project website page already established with a lot of good information on it. We call your attention to it. You can actually, if you take a photo of that QR code, it'll take you to that page. In addition to some of the basic historical information and factual information, we've started compiling this list of frequently asked questions. It's on that page, some of which we heard at the 3 previous community forums, and we'll be adding to that as we move along. So please, keep an eye out for this, both the Facebook and the project website page. But the next part of the rest of the evening is really, we'd like to hear from all of you. We have about 20 people here or so, I guess. And we'd like to hear if you want to use these as kind of lead-in questions to answer. What are you most excited about with this project? What are you concerned about? What are some of your hopes and dreams, and so forth? And we'd like to do that by, I guess we could probably go into a couple of breakout groups, maybe 3 different groups. You'll be assigned randomly, and hopefully feel a little more comfortable in a smaller group discussing things. But I also want to point out that this other QR code on this page will bring you to a form that you can fill out. If you'd like to give us your feedback in writing and just hit the submit button, you can do that. It's also available on the project website page as well, that form. So with that, if there are questions right now before we go into breakout rooms, I guess we should do that. Let me leave it on this other page, I guess. Let's go back there. Are there any general questions before we go into the breakout?
I have some general questions, Carl.
Yes, Joel.
I have 3 questions for Dr. Rabb.
Want to take us stop sharing your screen, and then we can all look together, see each other?
I certainly can. There we go.
Thank you. It's just a little easier that way.
Yep.
Okay, my first question is, are you only going to have elementary school in these buildings, or are you going to put anything else in, like pre-K, district offices, enhanced special needs, anything like that?
That's what we're trying to figure out right now. So the idea is to repurpose the Wilkins School. Our preschool is really busting at the seams. I know a lot of work was done at the Jones to put them there, and they've been successful. But we had a situation where we had to actually ask the Stoughton Extended Day to leave the basement of the Jones so that we could increase our preschool classrooms, and we did that. And even having done that, we're looking at our preschool really expanding. So, certainly 4 or 5 years from now, repurposing the Wilkins is on the table, and that's really the idea. Exactly who or what it would look like is still to be determined, but certainly repurposing it is a real issue.
All right, so that actually leads into my second question, which is, if you build a brand new building for over 500 students, you're going to have basically 2 abandoned school buildings. And of course, those people from Stoughton that are on here and have been around for a while know that Stoughton loves to collect abandoned buildings. It's one of the things we do very well. Okay, so what ideas do you have for the 2 buildings that will be abandoned?
Well, you mean in terms of the Jones and the Old South?
No, in terms of the Wilkins and the Old South.
So in terms of the Wilkins, that's exactly the plan, is really to look at what we could do with it. And if we could expand our preschool, there's also a push toward early childhood. I think federally we've had some beginnings of conversations of, what happens if we had universal preschool, if they really started in with something like that. And so I think for the Wilkins, there's certainly an opportunity there to expand our preschool, perhaps bring some administration over. For the South, I don't know. That I haven't really considered. I'm not quite sure what the idea would be for the South once we have the new building built, if that's the way we go. So.
Okay, and the next question I have is, I noticed that one of the things that you have crossed off the list that will not be considered as an option is an addition and renovation to the Wilkins School. Can I ask why that's not being considered?
Sure. I'll start that answer and then I might turn it over to the project team. But basically, it's the site constraints. So one of the things we like to do in any new elementary school is make sure there's appropriate blacktop space. There is a lovely playground at the Wilkins, but there is very little blacktop space and there's no real space there to grow. The site constraints would really limit that. But I'll let the project team perhaps give a little bit finer of an answer to that one.
Carl?
Yeah,
Courtney?
the project really focused on the South School and the two different enrollment possibilities. If the decision was made, to do a replacement South School, whether an addition renovation or a new school, for the 225 students, it's not really in the scope of our project to determine what happens to the Wilkins that's left if redistricting doesn't happen. So we are focused on just the South School at this time, Joel.
So the concept of using the Wilkins School, which backs up onto a very large playground, a bunch of fields, by the way, as I recall. So you're saying that the concept of doing an addition and a renovation to Wilkins to satisfy the plus 500 single school is not something that you feel is going to be considered as an option?
Not for the 500 enrollment, no, because we want to have schools, evenly geographically distributed in the town. And so we would want the larger school, if that's the way it goes, to be in the South District, where the South School is located now.
Okay, and Dr. Rabb, I have one more question for you. This is the big question for the evening. Cafetorium or gymatorium?
Cafeteria, most likely. The MSBA
Okay.
is very, very supportive of cafetoriums. That's
Okay,
the easiest
fine.
question I've gotten all day.
Oh, I had a problem in another district on that,
Okay.
so it's a big argument. Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joel. Any other questions before we'd like to, have a little bit of discussion in the smaller groups and then get people's feedback to those specific issues too, about what would you like to see in a new school and so forth, what excites you, and this is time for, blue sky thinking about things that we may not be able to consider later on, but it's good to hear where people's heads are at. So Jeff, if we get people in groups that we can go to breakout? But thanks everyone for participating. Like we said, we will share the outcome and people's thoughts on our project webpage. And the session itself actually is being recorded and that will be available too. So, and there will be another series of community forums and in another 3 weeks or so, we'll have another round as we advance further in this feasibility phase. And there's more to share and we're looking for everyone to, have an opportunity to give feedback. So the way the process is geared is that, there is a set of us consultants brought on, but the final decisions are actually made by the community. And before any decisions are final, it's always good to sort of share them and get people's feedback. So it's not as though we're just going to make decisions behind closed doors and then, broadcast it afterwards. So I don't know, Dr. Rapp, if you want to say a few closing words to folks still with us.
Again, thank you. I appreciate everybody's participation and look forward to more of these community forums, and we'll be getting the word out soon.
Great. And thanks, Jeff, for your technical assistance. We appreciate that, getting the words. So thank you, everyone. I guess we can sign off. Good night.
Good night.
Have a good time.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.